The evening felt different, though nothing special had happened. The sun was setting slowly behind a row of small houses, painting the sky in soft orange and pale pink. The street was quiet except for a few children riding bicycles, and the distant sound of a lawn mower shutting off. Inside one of those houses, a single father stood in front of a small mirror that hung slightly crooked on the wall. He adjusted his collar for the third time. He wasn't used to this. Most evenings, he wore old t-shirts and comfortable jeans. His life usually revolved around homework, dinner dishes, and making sure his child brushed their teeth before bed. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was going out. He took a slow breath and looked at himself carefully. The shirt was new, not expensive, just new, dark blue, neatly pressed. He had even shaved properly instead of rushing like he usually did before work. His hair was combed back, though a few stubborn strands refused to stay in place. Still, something felt off. He stepped back in the mirror and rubbed the back of his neck. It had been years since he had gone on a date. Years since he had even thought about how he looked to someone else. Most of his energy had been spent trying to be both mother and father, strong and soft, strict and patient, all at the same time. There had been no space left for him. He glanced at the clock. He still had 15 minutes. Enough time to change his mind. Enough time to come up with an excuse. Enough time to text and cancel. He picked up his phone, stared at the screen, then locked it again. "No," he whispered to himself. "You promised." His child was staying at his sister's house for the evening. It had taken him 2 weeks to gather the courage to ask for help. Even when his sister had smiled and said, "You deserve a break," he had felt guilty. A break felt selfish. He slipped on his shoes and stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. The air was cooler now. A light breeze moved through the trees. He stood on his porch for a moment, staring at the street like it was unfamiliar territory. That's when he noticed her. His neighbor was watering her plants, as she did almost every evening. She wore simple clothes, comfortable and practical, and her hair was tied back loosely. She moved calmly, focused on the small garden she had built over the years. They had been neighbors for 3 years. In that time, they had shared small conversations, borrowed tools, collected each other's mail during vacations. She had watched his child grow taller. He had helped her carry heavy grocery bags once when her wrist was hurting. Nothing dramatic, just quiet kindness. She looked up and saw him standing there, dressed differently than usual. She tilted her head, slightly surprised. "You're dressed up," she said with a small smile. He felt his face warm. "Yeah, I guess I am." She turned off the water and walked a little closer to the fence that separated their homes. "Big meeting?" He hesitated. This was silly. Why did he suddenly feel nervous? She was just his neighbor. They had spoken 100 times before. He cleared his throat. "Actually, I have a date." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but her expression stayed soft. "A date?" He nodded, then gave a small, awkward laugh. "Yeah, first one in. I don't even remember how long." There was a brief silence between them, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. He looked down at his shoes, then back at her. The question had been sitting in his chest since he stepped outside. It felt childish, almost embarrassing, but somehow her presence made it feel safe enough to ask. He ran a hand through his hair and said almost too quickly, "Do I look fine for my date?" The words hung in the air. She didn't answer right away. Instead of giving him the quick of course he expected, she studied him carefully, not in a critical way, not judging, just observing. He suddenly felt exposed, like she could see past the clean shirt and shaved face, like she could see the tired nights, the unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the silent worries he carried about being enough. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "It's okay," he added quickly. "You could be honest." She crossed her arms gently and leaned against the fence. "You want me to be honest?" He nodded. "You look nice," she said slowly. "The shirt suits you." Relief flickered across his face, but it disappeared when she continued. "But that's not what you're really asking." He blinked. "What do you mean?" She held his gaze steadily. "You're not asking about the shirt. You're asking if you look ready." The word landed deeper than he expected. "Ready?" He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He hadn't thought of it that way. He thought he was just asking about his clothes. Just a simple question. Wasn't it? She softened her voice. You've spent years putting yourself last. Work, your child, responsibilities. You forgot that you're allowed to live too. He let out a quiet breath. I didn't forget. I just didn't have time. She nodded gently. Maybe. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing yourself as someone worth dressing up for. Her words weren't harsh. They weren't loud, but they were honest. He looked down again, this time not at his shoes, but at his hands. They were rough from years of work. He suddenly noticed a faint scar near his thumb from when he cut himself cooking dinner in a rush. Small reminders of a life built on constant effort. I'm not good at this, he admitted. I don't even know what I'm doing. I almost canceled. Why didn't you? She asked. He shrugged. Because I'm tired of being scared. The honesty surprised even him. The breeze picked up slightly, moving a few leaves across the pavement. A car drove past slowly, then turned the corner. She gave him a look he couldn't quite describe. It wasn't pity. It wasn't amusement. It was something deeper, something thoughtful. You look fine, she said again, this time more firmly. But more than that, you look like someone who's trying. And that matters. He swallowed. And if the person you're meeting can't see that, she added softly, then they're not the right person. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He felt something shift inside his chest. Not a dramatic change. Not fireworks. Just a small, steady warmth. Like someone had quietly reminded him that he wasn't invisible. He gave her a half smile. You always are serious when someone asks about their shirt? She laughed lightly. Only when it's clearly not about the shirt. He felt his shoulders relax for the first time that evening. I guess I needed that, he said. I know, she replied. That simple answer made him look at her more closely. There was no judgment in her eyes, only understanding. He wondered how much she had noticed over the years. The nights he came home exhausted. The mornings he rushed out with mismatched socks. The weekends when he mowed the lawn while his child played nearby. Maybe she had seen more than he thought. He checked his watch. I should go. She nodded. Have a good time. He hesitated, then said quietly, Thanks for being honest. Anytime, she replied. He walked toward his car, heart beating a little faster, not just because of the date, but because of the conversation. As he opened the car door, he glanced back. She was still standing by the fence, watching him with a small smile before turning back to her plants. He sat inside the car and closed the door. For a few seconds, he didn't start the engine. He stared at his reflection in the rear-view mirror. He looked the same as he had 15 minutes ago. Same shirt, same face. But something felt different. He didn't just see a tired single father trying too hard. He saw a man who had survived difficult years. A man who had shown up every day, even when he was scared. A man who was finally giving himself permission to try again. He took a deep breath and started the engine. As he drove away from the quiet street, her words echoed softly in his mind. You look like someone who's trying. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. He drove for a while without turning on the radio. The city lights blurred past the windshield, but his mind stayed stuck on the quiet street he had just left behind. The words she had said kept repeating in his head. Not loudly, not sharply, but in a steady way that refused to fade. You look like someone who's trying. He had not realized how badly he needed to hear that. At a red light, he looked at his hands resting on the steering wheel. They were steady, but his chest felt tight. Dating was supposed to feel exciting. Instead, he felt thoughtful, almost unsettled. Not in a bad way. More like something inside him had been gently moved out of place. The restaurant was small and warm, with soft lights and low music. He arrived 10 minutes early and sat at a corner table. He straightened his shirt again, then stopped himself. He smiled faintly at his own habit. The person he was meeting arrived soon after. She was polite, friendly, and kind enough. They talked about work, daily routines, and small plans. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was awkward. But nothing felt right either. As the conversation moved along, he noticed himself drifting. His mind kept going back to the fence between two houses, to a calm voice that had spoken truth, without trying to impress or please. He answered questions, smiled at the right moments, even laughed. Yet he felt like he was watching himself from the outside. For the first time, he realized how long it had been since he had felt truly seen. When the date ended, they said goodbye with polite words and careful smiles. There was no tension, no disappointment, just a quiet understanding that this was not something meant to grow. On the drive home, he felt lighter than he expected. He had gone out, he had tried, and somehow, that felt like enough for one night. The house was dark when he returned. He kicked off his shoes near the door and sat on the couch without turning on the lights. The silence felt familiar, but not heavy. He leaned back and closed his eyes. For years, his life had been full of noise, alarm clocks, traffic, school mornings, work stress. But emotionally, it had been quiet. Too quiet. He had convinced himself that this was normal, that this was what responsibility looked like. But that night, he realized something simple and uncomfortable. He had been lonely, not just lonely for company, but lonely for understanding, for someone who noticed when he was tired, someone who didn't need him to explain himself. The next morning, he woke early and made breakfast as usual. His child would be back later that afternoon. He packed lunches, washed dishes, and cleaned the kitchen. Life moved on, steady and familiar. Still, something had changed. When he stepped outside to take out the trash, he saw his neighbor again. She was sitting on her porch, holding a mug, enjoying the morning air. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning." "Morning," he replied. There was a brief pause. Then she asked, "How was it?" He didn't pretend. He didn't dress it up. "It was fine," he said honestly. "Just fine." She nodded like she understood exactly what he meant. They stood there for a moment, sharing the quiet. Then she said, "Sometimes fine is just a step, not the destination." He smiled at that. "You're good with words." "I've had practice listening," she replied. That simple answer stayed with him as the days passed. They didn't suddenly start spending hours together. Life didn't turn into a movie. Instead, something more real happened. They began talking a little more than before. Short conversations near the fence turned into longer ones. A quick wave became a few minutes of sharing thoughts about work, parenting, and everyday struggles. There was no pressure, no expectations. He found himself looking forward to those moments. One evening, after a long day, he sat on his porch steps while his child played nearby. She walked over with 2 cups of tea and handed him one without asking. "You look like you could use this," she said. He accepted it quietly. "You're not wrong." They watched the sky change colors as the sun went down. The neighborhood sounds faded into the background. After a while, he spoke. "You know, I almost didn't ask you that night." She glanced at him. "Why not?" "I didn't want to hear something I wasn't ready for." She nodded. "But you were ready." He considered that. "Maybe, or maybe I just trusted you." That made her smile, but she didn't look away. "You didn't owe me honesty," he continued. "But you gave it anyway." "Because I've been there," she said quietly. He turned to her. "There." She hesitated, then spoke carefully, putting everyone else first. "Telling yourself there's no room left for you." He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her. "It's easy to disappear that way," she added. "You don't even notice it happening." He felt a tightness in his chest again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like recognition. From that evening on, their connection deepened in small ways. Shared smiles, easy laughter, comfortable silence. One night, after his child had gone to bed, he sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel empty. He realized something important. Her answer hadn't changed everything because it stopped him from dating. It changed everything because it made him see himself again. He began doing small things differently. He took better care of himself, not to impress anyone, but because he deserved it. He slept better, ate better, even laughed more. And without planning it, he started wondering what it would be like to sit across from her at a table, not as neighbors, but as something more. That thought scared him. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't stop him. Across the fence, she noticed a change too. The way he stood a little straighter. The way his smile came easier. The way his eyes didn't carry the same weight as before. She hadn't meant to change his life with her words. She had only meant to be honest. But honesty has a quiet power. And in the space between two houses, something real was slowly, gently beginning to grow. The change did not happen all at once. It came quietly, in small moments that were easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. He still woke up early, still rushed through mornings, still worried about bills and responsibilities. But something inside him had shifted. He felt more present, more awake in his own life. He noticed it one morning while making breakfast. His child was talking about school, sharing a long story that jumped from one topic to another. Usually, he would nod while thinking about the day ahead. This time, he listened, really listened. He laughed at the right moments. He asked questions. When his child smiled back at him, he felt a warm pride that had nothing to do with effort or sacrifice. It felt natural. Later that day, as he washed the dishes, he realized he was humming. That surprised him. He couldn't remember the last time he had done that. The conversations with his neighbor continued, still casual but growing deeper. Sometimes they talked over the fence. Other times they sat on their porches, each holding a warm cup, watching the sky change colors. They spoke about small things at first. Weather, work stress, neighborhood gossip that wasn't really gossip. Then, slowly, heavier topics found their way in. One evening, he mentioned how tired he felt all the time, even after sleeping. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She simply listened. When he finished, she said, "Being strong for too long can do that." The words stayed with him. He had always believed strength meant pushing through without complaint. He had learned to keep moving no matter how heavy things felt. But no one had ever told him that strength could also mean knowing when to slow down. He started allowing himself small pauses, sitting quietly for a few minutes before bed, taking a short walk without checking his phone. These moments didn't solve his problems, but they made them feel manageable. One afternoon, she knocked on his door. He opened it, surprised to see her standing there with a small bag in her hand. "I made extra," she said simply. "Thought you might want some." He hesitated, then smiled. "That's kind of you." They sat at the kitchen table and ate together. It wasn't a big meal, just simple food. But the house felt warmer with another person in it. His child chatted happily, comfortable around her in a way that made him pause. Later, after she left, his child asked, "Is she your friend?" He thought for a moment. "Yes," he said. "She is." That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The word friend felt too small, but he wasn't ready to name it anything else. He was scared, not of her, but of what allowing someone close might mean. He had built his life around control and routine. Letting someone in meant accepting that things could change. Change had hurt him before. A few days later, while standing by the fence, she spoke first. "You've been quieter lately." He smiled lightly, thinking more. "About what?" "About whether I'm allowed to want more than just getting through the day." She studied him. "What do you think?" "I think I'm learning that surviving isn't the same as living." She nodded slowly. "That's an important lesson." He didn't realize how much he needed validation until he received it. Their bond grew in shared honesty. One evening, she admitted that she often felt invisible in her own way. That people assumed she was fine because she handled things calmly. That no one ever asked if she needed support. "You do," he said without thinking. She looked at him, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so," he replied. From that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a mutual understanding, a quiet agreement to be real with each other. Life didn't slow down to make space for their connection. It continued at its usual pace. Work deadlines, school issues, exhaustion. But now, there was someone to share the weight with. One evening, after a long day, he found himself laughing over something small she said. The sound felt unfamiliar, but good. He realized he had been holding joy at a distance, afraid it would disappear if he reached for it. That fear had kept him guarded. He began to see that his neighbor had never asked him to be anything other than himself. She didn't expect perfection. She didn't demand attention. She simply showed up, consistently and kindly. That scared him more than rejection ever could, because consistency meant hope. One night, A storm rolled in unexpectedly. Rain poured down hard, and the wind rattled windows. His child grew nervous. Unable to sleep, he sat beside the bed, telling calm stories, rubbing small circles on their back. After the storm passed and his child finally slept, he stepped onto the porch for air. She was there, wrapped in a light jacket, watching the rain fade. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah," he replied. "Just one of those nights." They stood together, listening to the quiet after the storm. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said suddenly. She turned to him. "About what?" "About this," he said, gesturing vaguely between them. "About letting myself care." She didn't rush to answer. "Neither do I," she said honestly. "But maybe that's okay." He looked at her, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't just safe, but warm. The thought made his chest tighten, not with fear, but with possibility. Later, lying in bed, he realized something important. The neighbor's answer that night had not pushed him toward romance. It had pushed him toward himself. He was no longer asking if he looked fine for a date. He was asking if he was ready to be seen. And slowly, carefully, he was learning that he was. The closeness between them became something he could feel even when they weren't talking. It showed up in a way he noticed her car pulling into the driveway, in the way he caught himself wondering how her day had been, in the quiet comfort that came from knowing someone nearby understood him without needing explanations. Still, he held back, not because he didn't care, but because caring felt risky. One evening, after a long day, he found her sitting on her porch steps, staring at the ground. The porch light was on, but she hadn't noticed him yet. Something about her posture told him this wasn't one of their easy, light moments. He walked closer and cleared his throat softly. "Hey!" She looked up, surprised, then offered a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey! You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I think so. Just tired." He nodded and sat a short distance away. Not too close, not too far. The space between them felt careful. They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, but heavy. Finally, she spoke. "Can I be honest with you?" He turned slightly toward her. "You always are." She took a breath. "Sometimes I feel like I'm standing still while everyone else keeps moving forward." He listened. "I watch people build families, careers, lives that feel full," she continued. "And I tell myself I'm fine, that I don't need more. But some nights, I wonder if that's true." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. He felt a pull in his chest. He recognized the feeling too well. "I've told myself the same thing," he said quietly. She looked at him. "And do you believe it?" He thought about his routine, his walls, the years he had spent convincing himself that wanting more was dangerous. "I think I was trying to protect myself." She nodded slowly. "Me too." The truth hung between them, clear and fragile. He wanted to reach out, to say something that would make it better. But he didn't. He stayed where he was and let the moment breathe. After a while, she smiled again, this time more genuinely. "Thanks for listening." "Anytime," he said. And he meant it. The next few days were different. Not distant, but more thoughtful. Their conversation slowed, grew deeper. Less small talk, more meaning. One afternoon, while they were both outside, she asked, "Do you ever feel guilty for wanting happiness?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes," he answered honestly. "All the time." "Why?" she asked. He looked at his child playing nearby, laughing without worry. "Because I'm afraid that if I focus on myself, I'll fail at being what they need." She listened carefully. "Loving yourself doesn't take love away from anyone else," she said. "It usually gives you more to offer." He wanted to believe her. That evening, after his child went to bed, he sat alone in the living room, the lights low. Her words replayed in his mind. Loving yourself doesn't take love away. He realized how often he had treated happiness like a limited resource. Like if he took too much, someone else would go without. That belief had shaped every decision he made. A few nights later, something shifted. They were standing by the fence, talking about nothing important. The sky was dark, dotted with stars. He laughed at something she said, then stopped suddenly. "What?" she asked. I almost forgot what this feels like, he said. What feels like? Being myself without feeling guilty. She studied him for a moment. You don't look guilty right now. I'm not, he admitted, and that scares me. She smiled gently. Good. He exhaled. You're not making this easy. I'm not trying to, she replied. There was a pause. The air felt charged but calm. He felt the urge to say something important, something honest. His heart beat faster. I need to tell you something, he said. She didn't interrupt. I'm afraid of starting something I can't protect, he continued. I built my life around being careful, around not needing too much. And caring about you, it feels like stepping into the unknown. She nodded. I'm afraid too. You are? Yes, she said softly. But I think some things are worth being afraid for. The words settled deep inside him. That night, he didn't sleep much. Not because of worry, but because his mind kept opening doors he had long kept closed. He imagined mornings that didn't feel rushed, evenings filled with conversation, a home that felt shared. He also imagined disappointment, loss, pain. But for the first time, the fear didn't feel louder than the hope. The next day, while helping his child with homework, he noticed how calm he felt, how present. He realized that allowing himself to feel hadn't made him weaker. It had made him more alive. Later, as the sun began to set, he walked outside and saw her standing by the fence, waiting, as if she knew he would come. He didn't hesitate this time. I've been thinking, he said. So have I, she replied. I don't know where this leads, he said, but I know I don't want to pretend it's nothing. She met his eyes. Neither do I. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden decision, just two people standing close, choosing honesty over fear. That choice changed everything, not because it promised happiness, but because it allowed the possibility of it. And for him, that was something he had waited a long time to allow. The days that followed felt steady, not rushed, not dramatic. Nothing about their lives suddenly became perfect. Bills still arrived. Work remained demanding. Parenting was still tiring. But something important had changed beneath all of that. There was no longer a sense of facing everything alone. They didn't announce anything. They didn't label what was growing between them. They simply allowed it to exist. Some evenings, they talked over the fence like always. Other times, they sat together after dinner while his child played nearby or read quietly. The comfort felt natural, like something that had been missing for a long time and had finally found its place again. One night, while washing dishes together, he paused and said, I used to think peace meant nothing changing. She looked at him. And now I think peace is knowing change won't destroy you. She smiled at that. There were moments when old fears surfaced, when he worried about failing again, when she wondered if she was asking for too much. Instead of hiding those thoughts, they spoke about them, slowly, carefully, without blame. That honesty became their foundation. His child noticed the difference before he did. One afternoon, after she had gone home, his child asked, Are you happier lately? The question caught him off guard. I think I am, he said. Why? The child asked. He thought for a moment. Because I'm not pretending I don't need people anymore. The child nodded like that made perfect sense. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. Small routines formed. Shared grocery runs. Quiet walks. Simple meals that stretched longer because no one was in a hurry to leave. One evening, while sitting on the porch, she asked him, Do you remember the night you asked if you looked fine? He laughed softly. I do. You were nervous, she said. I still am, he admitted. She turned toward him. About what? About how one small question led here. She smiled. Maybe it wasn't small. He looked out at the street, now familiar in a new way. Maybe I was ready and I just didn't know it. She didn't respond right away. She reached for his hand instead. The gesture was simple, but it held weight. He didn't pull away. For the first time in years, touch didn't feel like a risk. It felt like reassurance. Life continued to test them. There were tired days, disagreements, moments when silence returned. But silence no longer felt empty. It felt thoughtful. He noticed how he handled stress differently now, how he didn't shut down, how he allowed himself to ask for help, how he forgave himself for not being perfect. She noticed it too. "You're lighter," she told him one night. He smiled. "So are you." They weren't fixing each other. They were reminding each other of who they already were. One quiet morning, as sunlight filled the kitchen, he stood by the window holding a cup of coffee. His child was getting ready for school, laughing at something small. Outside, she was watering her plants, just like she always had. Everything looked ordinary, but it didn't feel ordinary. He realized then that the moment that changed his life hadn't been the date. It hadn't even been the conversation afterward. It was a moment he had allowed himself to be seen without pretending. That question, "Do I look fine for my date?" had never been about appearance. It had been about worth. And her answer had reminded him that he already had it. Later that evening, as they walked side by side, he said, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For answering honestly that night," he said, "even when it would have been easier not to." She looked at him. "Thank you for asking." They stopped walking. The sky above them was clear, the street quiet, the moment calm. There was no promise spoken, no future planned out loud, but there was trust. And sometimes that is more than enough. He no longer wondered if he looked fine. He knew he was.